Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Josephine Franklin, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Our topic today is Getting Better Together, Principal and Assistant Principal. Following are a few technical notes of information to assist you during the webinar. If you have a technical problem during the broadcast, please call Zoom support at the toll-free number typed in red, 888-799-9666, extension 2, and provide today's webinar ID that you see typed in red, 244-602-939. As you participate in this webinar, we invite you to expand the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NASSP-webinars. We are also on Facebook at facebook.com/principals. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available, as well as the PowerPoint, on NASSP website within 24 hours at nassp.org/webinars. We are pleased to have with us today Shawn DeRose and Katie Madigan. Shawn is the principal of Glasgow Middle School in Fairfax County, one of the largest and most diverse public schools in Virginia. Katie is an assistant principal at Glasgow Middle School. She also has experience working in Arlington Public Schools and Alexandria Public Schools. During the webinar, the presenters invite your questions. Please submit them using the chat box on your webinar panel. We will respond to as many questions as time permits. If we run out of time to answer all questions, we will respond via email following the broadcast. Shawn and Katie, welcome, and thank you for being with us today. And I'll hand these over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. And here is today's agenda. Let me first say Happy Assistant Principals Week to everybody. Katie and I are really excited to be hosting this webinar, Getting Better Together, at Glasgow Middle School. So let's jump right in. See if I can make this slide change. There we go. So I'm Shawn DeRose, principal at Glasgow Middle School.
And I'm Katie Madigan. I'm an assistant principal here at Glasgow, and I joined Glasgow in the fall of 2016, which was Shawn's second year here as principal.
Yeah, a little bit of background about Glasgow Middle School, which is on the next slide. Glasgow is a huge school with over 1,800 students. You can see the diversity of our students, located right in Fairfax County, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. We like to say that we have every type of learner from every type of background with every type of need in our building, and we absolutely love it.
So our goal for today is to leave you with specific ideas of how you might partner with your principal or AP together in a way that's dynamic, collaborative, and mutually beneficial. So with that, let's jump right in.
Yeah. All right. Making the roles collaborative. So I think, first of all, when we say collaboration, well, let's just back up for a second just to the past thing. When we say making the roles collaborative, Katie, why don't you jump in?
All right. So we love working together because we found ways to make our roles collaborative. We're always trying to find ways to get better together. We've been really purposeful over the last 3 years to find ways that we can ensure that we're always partners in the work of leading our building and pushing each other's thinking. We're going to share some of the ways that we've gotten to this point with you all today. And first, we're really going to dive into this one of making roles collaborative.
Yeah, so let's transition to when we say collaborative. It has many different meanings to many different people. Let's build some common language around this word. right? So first of all, we have a agreed upon vision that both Katie and I and our entire admin team specifically is clear on. We have shared ownership of the work that we do. I'm invested in Katie's work, and she is invested in mine. And there's an implied trust, a high level of trust and support between us, and we intentionally pursue two-way communication. So there's a tremendous amount of benefit when we work this collaboratively, specifically how we share each other's perspectives. We share the burden at times together. We share the success and the professional growth experience. I get stronger as a principal communicating with Katie, and hopefully she says the same thing, vice versa. So as you all know, the job of the principal and the assistant principal, in which me personally, I spent almost a decade as an assistant principal, is demanding and complex and challenging. So having someone to shoulder that work alongside you really makes a world of difference. And as I said before, it really helps us both grow. So when Katie and I started working together, this is now our third year working together. Our first step was really to get tight on having a clear vision for what it means when we work together. I told her that I am really bringing you on as part of a team because I needed Katie specifically. I needed her expertise around English instruction. And at our school, we needed to take it to a different level. We needed to increase student achievement across all grade levels. And I needed her to drive the English department specifically toward higher quality instruction on a daily basis. And as you heard in the introductions, Katie has experience at 2 other divisions before coming to Glasgow.
So having this level of clarity, knowing exactly what I needed to focus, where I needed to focus my attention and what I needed to do to be successful, it really helped me. It helped me to have more clear, purposeful conversations with Shawn because I knew exactly what I was looking towards and what I was working towards. So these are 2 questions that we use when we're sitting down together that you might want to sit down with your principal or your AP pair to think about opening the doors to higher levels of collaboration. Making sure that you're driving towards the same outcomes. So we use these questions of what are we working toward together and what would success look like and sound like? And we come back to these often as we're trying to refocus our work and make sure that we're on the right path.
Absolutely. So moving on, after we had a clear vision for what we were going to work together towards, our next step was to establish clear ownership.
So Shawn and I developed a clear structure for how we were going to share ownership over the English department. I knew that I needed to set the vision myself for the English department of where and plan how we were going to get there, but I also knew that Shawn needed to be able to speak to the work happening in the English department and to be able to provide input and guidance when needed.
Yeah, and I think the first thing as a principal, what I had to do around this topic of shared ownership was set up a structure in which I could speak to the work that was happening. So we ended up using weekly check-in meetings where Katie would come and share out the work that she was doing. It allowed me to be involved in the work at a level that I absolutely needed to be. As I said before, and Katie mentioned, I needed to be able to speak to it as principals when those outside the building asked questions. But the check-in meetings did more than that, just about informing me. It was a chance for me to push Katie's thinking. But I wanted Katie to really be the one to start the agendas for our check-in meetings and the one to be driving the work on a day-to-day basis without having to wait for her to sign off on any decisions that had to be made.
So we recommend using these 2 questions to help us determine what system or structure will work with you. We often come back to these 2 questions when we're thinking about what's the shared ownership. What parts of the work do we each own? What do I own as the assistant principal and the head of the English department? What does Shawn own? And then how and when do I need to get input or support? Where do I get stuck, and how can I open the door for feedback?
Yeah, so I think, the previous slide obviously talks about setting a clear vision. This slide talks about establishing shared ownership and structures to do that. And I think the next really slide that we get into is, how do we make these roles collaborative? And in making these roles collaborative really was the first step for Katie and I's professional relationship and the success that we've been having working together. So probably the best part is that we really are able to get better by working together. So let's take a second and dive in deep around getting better together. So when we say getting better together, again, this is what we mean. We mean we are expanding our skill set by learning from each other. We are refining our approaches through collaboration, and we're broadening our perspectives by hearing each other's thinking. There's a lot of sharing each other's thinking process in our check-in meetings, and this is such a huge benefit because we're modeling lifelong learning for our students, but not just our students, I think our staff as well, and we've seen an overall improvement for kids. The stronger that Katie and I's relationship, or the relationship the principal has with their administrative team, it's going to resonate throughout the building. So the first way we get better together is to really set high expectations for ourselves. I know that this seems obvious, maybe, but making explicit, it is essential for helping each other to get better in our work.
So Shawn had given me the ownership over the English department, and we had our weekly check-ins in place as the system to help with accountability and feedback. But we also needed to have a direct, somewhat vulnerable conversation around what we would each need to do to accomplish the goals that we had. One way we did this was using a pre-mortem. We sat down and asked each other, let's pretend we get to the end of the year and we don't make any gains in English. What went wrong? What mistakes did I make, and what mistakes did Shawn make?
Yeah, and this pre-mortem that Katie speaks about, while it sounds negative, it's really an easy way to play just that worst case scenario and really identify potential problems or problem areas and pitfalls really before we fall into them.
For example, it was hard for me to stay focused on English at times. There was school-wide work that was interesting to me and that I wanted to be involved in at a deeper level. And Shawn told me, you need to stay focused and you need to win at English. This was kind of an ongoing joke last year and this year too. And for me as a competitive swimmer, this was a really helpful and motivating way for me to remember what I needed to do. Stay focused on English and get the job done. So we use these questions to help us set high expectations, or we use this question to help us set high expectations together. What do we each need to do in order to accomplish our vision?
Yeah, and I think this question really drew out the expectations that we were going to hold for each other. So knowing that we needed to set high expectations, and that was the first step, we also need to invite each other's feedback. And this can be, at least for me, at times, at least in my first year as principal, this was an area for me to really grow on. This was not something that I was used to, but inviting that feedback really helped me grow and work better with my admin team.
Yeah, and I think I'd say the same. This is something that I wasn't comfortable with at first, but now I just kind of crave it. I want people telling me what I'm doing and where I can get better. So one way that we did this, actually as a whole admin team last summer at our summer retreat, was we each gave each other feedback on these 3 questions. We had a poster up and it had 3 questions and we carouseled around and we each gave each other honest feedbacks. And the questions were, what is one thing that I do currently that you'd like me to continue to do? What is one thing I don't currently do frequently enough that you think I should do more often? And what can I do to be more effective?
Yeah, and for me as a principal, this was really, really powerful. And as I said before, and really challenging. For me, it was clear that my team valued my support, my humor, of course, but they really wanted more direct, clear feedback from me. And I can tell you, we did this on a Post-it chart paper. And if we had video into this webinar right here in our office or my office, you would see that chart paper hanging up. It's a great reminder for me of where my strengths are and what I need to be mindful of every day to better support my administrative teams or my administrative team, which obviously resonates, as we said earlier, just throughout the building. Yeah,
and you'd see the same in my office. I use it up there as a reminder for me too. And knowing each other's strengths and areas of growth has really helped us to get better. Our relationship, our working relationship, and our whole admin team's relationship. Knowing Shawn wanted to get better at feedback and clarity made it easier for me to help him grow in those areas too.
Yeah, so just to go back to that chart paper that Katie and I were just talking about, it's not necessarily up on the screen. It talks about, do we know our own strengths and growths? But I just wanted to come back and say it one more time. We didn't make a slide to it, but what is one thing that we all wrote down? What is one thing that I currently do that you'd like me to continue doing? What is one thing that I don't do currently with much frequency or with enough frequency that you think I should do it more often? And what can I do to be more effective? I really like the wording of this. Some of you may have have experience with saying, what should I start doing? What should I stop doing? And what should I continue doing? Which I think is good. But we were very purposeful in rolling this out with this language, as I think it was a little bit more disarming, especially as a team. We had new members of our team, but these questions really helped us get feedback in meaningful ways that would lead to both of our growth. So with that, we have come towards the closing of this. We want to give opportunities for questions and answers at the very end. I think what is most important through this webinar and our conversations that we're having, Katie and I are having, and sharing our experiences with you, that from our perspective, the way to maximize the partnership really between a principal and an assistant principal is to make time for the questions that we shared today. One thing that we say here at Glasgow Middle School is all the time is that conversation is the relationship. This is true not only between Katie and myself, but a conversation that we have with our staff has with students, everybody has with each other. So I encourage you really to share this webinar or ask with your principal or your assistant principal or assistant principals. Ask for time to meet with them and walk through these questions, because I can tell you and guarantee that it's really going to push you to a higher level of collaboration and growth moving forward. So with that, I think we've gotten through our slides today, and I know there's a large number of attendees that are out there. I did want to open it up to see if we had any questions that we may be able to answer.
Thank you, Shawn and Katie. And yes, we do have some questions we'd like for you to address. The first question is, as principal and AP pair, how do you create and support an environment focused on academic achievement in which all staff members celebrate student success?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the question. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, and I'm going to just go back up if we can, just to our um, profile of our school, because I think it's really important. We're the largest middle school in the Commonwealth of Virginia. As I said earlier, we think that we serve every student from every background with every language who's every type of learner. And that creates immense challenges. But one of the things I think that we do really well is we have a set of clear priorities at our school. And I think that clear priorities that we have as an admin team, we have instructional coaches, our collaborative team leads, our teachers. Despite our size, despite our demographics, we are all aligned in our work. I think we can also say the same thing around common language, right? Katie, if you want to talk a little bit about what common language means here.
Yeah, we spent a lot with the pruning down, or that idea of clear priorities that Shawn was talking about, we really have pruned down so that teachers know exactly what to focus on. We have a really clear instructional focus for our staff that they can plan their lessons around, and we spend a lot of time in our staff development building common language around that instructional focus. And so with that, we also then build up our collaborative teams, and that they then take a lot of ownership around their students' growth. And we really try and make just a big deal when we do find those successes, the everyday successes and the bigger successes that may come at the end.
Absolutely. So, I think alignment on a clear set of priorities. Katie's mentioned common language. I think the other thing that we do that allows for an increase in student achievement throughout our building is really developing and tweaking systems and structures to support that common language, that supports those clear priorities. Does everything really relate back to those priorities and the language that we're using to talk about them? And the last thing that we would say at our schools, we talk a lot about humanizing the work. School improvement is difficult, and really with most school improvement and all school improvement comes change, and change for everyone is difficult. It is challenging. It's exciting, and so knowing that that's the reaction of any time that you try something different, that's just human nature. We talk about it in terms of just humanizing the work. So I think really that's all the long answer. The short term for us is really establishing clear priorities, developing common language around key terms that we use, a lot of jargon in education, looking internally at your school systems and structures to support those priorities, and then just recognizing that we're human and we need to keep that in the back of our mind as we change and improve.
Thank you. I do have another question here. How do you foster shared leadership among an admin team and increase teacher or team effectiveness?
Yeah, one of the things that I will say just as a principal is the questions that Katie and I are sharing with you today and the check-in meetings that Katie and I have. We are doing that we have a large administrative team, obviously with 1,800 students. We have a number of administrators, and buying time or scheduling time to have these conversations with each administrator is really important. So I think some of the strategies that Katie and I shared is replicated with all of our admin team. I also think that alignment, we talk about it in terms of systems and structures that I mentioned in the previous answer. I think that, do you have systems and structures that support not only your administrators, but also your teacher leaders, and we call them CT leads at this school. We have instructional coaches. So are you using the same language in developing systems and structures, some of which we talked about today, with key members of your staff? Because if you are all speaking the same language, you're all clear on what your priorities are, there are systems and structures to have those meaningful conversations, and you're taking into account that these people, that change is hard and exciting, and that we're all human beings. If you're doing all of those things, it fosters a sense of community, which empowers not only administrators, which we're talking about today, but I think if you were to have any of our instructional coaches that were in this webinar, or our teacher leaders, or really even our teachers, we're all talking and saying the same things, and we're all clearly aligned. Where when that happens, when you have that level of alignment, it's truly empowering when anybody in the building can speak to those areas.
Yeah, I think another thing in addition to that we do, or support a system behind that, is we have admin meetings on Mondays with Shawn, and we have admin CT on Fridays. It's just the assistant principals and deans without Shawn. And when we sit down and have those meetings together, that's when we sit down together and align just in how we're giving feedback. We align on instructional conversations. We might do some collective problem solving together. So we're building that efficacy together so that when we do have Shawn with us in the Monday meetings, we're all talking the same language, and we've had a lot of time to process and think through things behind the scenes. So I think that's another way that Shawn kind of empowers us to build our own collective efficacy, so that as an admin team, we're just more effective together.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off that. And I spent, like as I said earlier, I spent almost a decade as an assistant principal. And the principal role, similar to the assistant principal role, it's demanding, it's complex, it's challenging. At the same time, I think there are some elements of the principalship that is just so extreme that often leads to administrators, assistant principals, and principals being overwhelmed, feeling like we're doing this work in isolation. I've worked on teams where we haven't had high levels of collaboration, and so it felt, I felt very isolated, and I was quickly burning out. So I can tell you that not only for all the positives that we've talked about earlier in the presentation around professional growth, around just getting better together, I can also tell you just from a work-life balance, this level of collaboration at times can be challenging, but knowing I have a partner in Katie, but really a partner with the entire admin team where I can say I'm stuck in my thinking, tell me more, or they have an idea and I just don't get it, and just say, tell me more, I'm just not there yet. Being able to have a shoulder partner or thought partner through this work has really led my professional growth, my professional development to take it to the next level. And I think there's sometimes when we come into this role, or when you come into the role as a principal or even an assistant principal, there's this mindset that we have to know everything, that we have to be the best at everything. And I can tell you, if you have that approach or that mindset, you're not going to last very long in this job. There are times where I, as a principal, am out front and I am leading. More oftentimes, I'm shoulder to shoulder with the rest of our admin and some of our teacher leaders, and I'm learning alongside. And as Katie kind of mentioned, just the roles specifically around English and language arts at our school, I didn't have a background, much understanding of this at the middle school level. So in many times, Katie was leading, and I was, a step behind her, or I guess maybe leading from behind might sound like a nicer way of saying it. But I think you have to have that realization as an administrator that you cannot know everything. You do not know everything. And the more that you can collaborate, the more that you can share your thinking with others and get input and feedback, the stronger that you're going to be as an admin.
Thank you, Shawn. Are you seeing any other questions on your end?
Let me check. How often do you meet, and what are the non-negotiables of your scheduling? Well, I think we meet weekly. The non-negotiables really are, we set clear expectations of what the purpose of the meetings are. When we talk about non-negotiables, I don't think we've ever phrased it in that term. I think what we've said is, what is the purpose of these meetings, and staying true to that purpose. we'll also meet during this time to really talk a little bit about, I will share out what other things are going on in the division. So we have a very large, Fairfax County is the 10th or 11th largest division in the country. So sharing out where our priorities are as a division. But we'll also take that time to really look at our internal assessments. And we do that each week. We spend about, with Katie, we spend about an hour each week together, and that's usually the norm. With some of our other areas, we may narrow it down to about 30 minutes or 45 minutes moving forward.
Thank you. All right. If there are more questions out there, we will follow up on email because we have kind of run at the end of our time here. Shawn, would you please advance to the last slide?
Absolutely. To the very end?
To the very end, please.
Absolutely. I'm hitting it. Let's see if it comes through. There we go.
All right. There we are. One more. Thank you. I'd like to extend an invitation to join your colleagues for the 2019 National Principals Conference, sponsored by NASSP, July 18th through the 20th, 2019 in Boston. You can learn about the conference and register at the address shown on the slide, www.principalsconference.org. Thank you all for joining us today, and that concludes our webinar. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.